Okay, we've got the recording started. Today is April 30th, 2024. This is the Operator Framework Working Group meeting. And we'll jump right into our agenda. So it looks like there's no new briefs or RFCs yet for review, although I know that we're working on a few. So I expect next week we'll have some of those posted for review. But in the meantime, I know that we've been doing some prototyping to sort of set the stage for what those briefs and RFCs will talk about. But we've seen the roadmap, right? We can look at this again, but they're going to align with what's in the roadmap. So first up, we have Varsha, Todd, and Brett doing a quick demo of using Helm to manage content in Operator Controller. Are you guys ready?
Yep, we can get started.
Wait, let me stop sharing and you can take over.
Okay, let me try sharing now. Is my screen visible?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So before we start the demo, I just wanted to give a brief overview. Since the last few weeks, we have been discussing about using Helm directly to manage content, which is being installed by Operator Controller. So for the past few days, Todd, Brett, and I have been working on a quick POC to get an idea of what it would take to remove Ruckpack and to directly embed the Helm logic to install content in the operator controller. We will have a brief out soon that will talk in detail about what we have figured out through the POC, what we are trying to accomplish, and things like that. Right now, the POC is in progress. So this is going to be a very quick demo of getting a cluster extension up and seeing whether the installed content is available, is applied on cluster or not by the Helm directly. So to move things faster, this is what the cluster looks like. I'm using Tilt, so I just commented out the Ruckpack installation from the Tilt. So as you can see, we don't have any kind of Ruckpack controllers available or running. We just have the operator controller part, running the operator controller manager logic, where we have embedded Helm, and also we have the catalog D, which is as usual, trying to get the catalog content on the cluster. And I also have created a catalog for the purposes of demo. And this demo, the work which we have been doing is restricted to only registry v1 bundles. And we will install we'll use the image source, which is one of the options in Ruckpack. I know Ruckpack had other options in terms of installing content, but for now we'll just be using the image source. So this catalog is available on cluster, and for the purposes of demo, this just creates one Prometheus registry v1 operator. And yeah, I'll go ahead and create a cluster extension and let's see what happens. I'm using Tilt. So we have something running here. We are facing issues with running the reconcile successfully, but for now, let's see what the cluster extension looks like and if we have contents available on cluster. So yeah, we have the Prometheus operator running, and let's see what the cluster extension looks like. So yeah, we have conditions populated saying that the module has been installed successfully. And this was using Helm because we don't have any Ruckpack running on cluster. So yeah, that was it from my end. I intentionally didn't go into the specifics of how we are doing it, and the various features we have been trying around with Helm. We'll probably do that in a follow-up once we have the entire feature solid, ready, and running, and talk about the architecture in detail.
That's awesome, Barsha. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I have one. Varsha, I noticed in the status of the cluster extension, the resolved source name and version, the name was the image reference and the version was empty. Is that something that you had to do just to get things working, or what's the deal with that?
This was just when we were trying to get things working from what we had in the cluster extension. I just realized that the version is empty, so that's a good point. We'll probably have to go back and check what's happening here. But this was just to be consistent with the extension status. So we just ported that functionality here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we haven't plumbed everything yet.
Yep, no worries. I was just curious if you ran into an issue trying to populate that without having rough back under the hood.
Yeah, we'll just look into that. Just realize that. So probably something to do in the background.
Awesome. Thanks for the demo, everybody. Next up, we have Nikolai, quick demo of the validating admission policy. Nikolai, are you ready for that?
Yeah, I was trying to give Zoom permissions and it says I need to restart. 1 second. I'll
Sure.
be back. All right, it should work now. Sorry about that. It's I think I'm since switching to a new machine, I haven't shared anything in Zoom. So hopefully you can see my terminal now.
Yep.
Great. So it's also like super quick demo, but a bit of background first. So right now in operator controller we have we enforce that package uniqueness across cluster extension APIs. So the controller ensures that there is no 2 or more cluster extension instances using the same package from the catalogs available on the cluster. So basically, relatively simple check that package name on the cluster extension does not appear on any other instance of package name. But we are doing it on a cluster on the controller side. So it feels a little bit late in the process because we already admitted the resource to the cluster and we can just on the error. That's one thing. Another thing is that it is currently being enforced as part of the resolution process where we use DAPI library, and we are going away from DAPI. So removing DAPI is currently something which is up for a review on GitHub. And once we remove DAPI, there will be nothing to enforce it. So we explored a relatively new API from Kubernetes, validation admission policy, which is currently in beta in Kubernetes version 1.29, and I think it was in beta since 1.26, but it will become stable in 1.30, which is already GA, I believe. So we created a few manifests on the cluster which enforce the same thing, but on the admission level and requires 0 Golang code, basically. So I'm just going to demo how it works. Basically, it's Kubernetes demo rather than OLM, but in context of OLM. So I already have a cluster running here. So just a kind cluster, and I'm going to apply sample manifest we have in operator controller repo cluster extension. You can see that. I'll apply it and I will show the contents. So we have just applied Argo CD operator for specific version. It got created successfully. Now I'm going to just edit this manifest and say get rid of the version. Yeah, let's get rid of it. And we can say we'll keep the same operator and I will change the name. So it will be like a different operator, a different instance. kubectl apply. So we get rejected on the admission. So there is an error message saying that Argo CD operator is already installed on another instance of cluster extension. So that's basically it. And there is like there are a few variations. So for example, we can also go back to the new instance, and we can say we can try and install another operator, and it will be successfully installed. So currently on the cluster we have 2 operators. And what if I go and edit this one and switch package name to Argo CD and try to apply it? So I get an error as well that it already exists. So that's basically it. So we have we are now using Kubernetes standard API to enforce this uniqueness on the package. And I think we are going to probably be using more of it. I think Joe can probably talk more about another use case we see for admission validation policy. I think it has something to do with owning that every single object should be owned by only one owner or something like that. Joe, would you? I'm putting you on the spot. Would you like to talk a bit more about this?
Yeah. So before I talk about that, I want to just say that was a great demo, Nikolai. Thanks a lot. This validating mission policy API is probably going to eliminate a large chunk of what we would have originally implemented as a validating webhook, which have all sorts of implications on having to have certificates and make them rotated and have network connections between the API server and our thing. It's a sort of a mess. So I think this is a huge improvement over validating webhooks. So I'm glad that A, it's a thing that exists in Kubernetes, and B, that we're starting to adopt it already. For what you were mentioning, Nikolai, about another use of validating mission policy is we're going to have a rule that essentially says that only like every single object that is being managed by a cluster extension can only be managed by exactly one cluster extension. And an easy way to think about this is thinking about like CRDs, right? Like you don't want 2 different cluster extensions to claim ownership over a CRD. You only want one cluster extension to claim ownership for the CRD. And then that way it sort of ensures that everyone on the entire cluster who depends on that CRD knows what the source of truth is for what actually defines what that CRD is going to be. And so the way that we're going to implement that is also with a validating mission policy, where we can essentially put some labels on all of the objects that are maintained by operator controller and say like the name of the cluster extension that owns this is foo. And then essentially like we'll make that label immutable, right? So like the first cluster extension that creates or adopts that thing will be allowed to set the label, and then nothing else can update the label. So only like from then on, only foo can be the value of that label. And then if the cluster extension eventually gets deleted, and we have a feature which we're planning to add for orphaning all of the objects, then the rule would also allow that label to be deleted, right? So you can create the label, you can delete the label, but you can't change the label. And so we're going to use validating admission policy to define that logic as well. All right, that is the end of our agenda. I guess we can do a quick roadmap check-in. Let me share my screen again. Not much has changed, I don't think. So basically looking at this, we've got three epics that are currently in the need design phase. We're actually sort of working on these as we go. We've got like basically as soon as we have briefs that are all up and accepted, then we'll move them over into accepted in progress. I expect a lot of this will move very quickly over to the right in the next month or so. So really it's like these 5 things are all in progress. This particular epic is actually already merged. So the only reason this is still in progress, the skip replace the skip range thing, is because we haven't implemented or we haven't written docs for it yet. So as soon as the docs are done, then we'll move that over into the finished column. Otherwise, we're still working on safe CRD upgrades, and we're going to implement the plan for the initial phase of what we're going to support for Registry V1 bundles. So the only thing we have to add here that we haven't done already is rejecting bundles that define constraints for other bundles. So things like OLM.gbk.required and OLM.package.required. And then there's another type called OLM.constraint, which is essentially a way to let you combine multiple of the others. That last one is, I'm not sure if anybody ever used it, but if they did, like we're going to reject that as well. And essentially the thinking there is we don't have any support for handling those types of constraints yet, and we don't want to violate any of the assumptions of those bundles. So we'll just say like, sorry, like that bundle currently isn't supported yet. You can't install it, rather than install it without also installing its dependencies. So I think we're still working on like how that's going to work over time. Porting some of the extension reconciler logic over, that's still ongoing. We've started to break that down, although I don't know if there's any sub issues here yet, but we've at least defined essentially what we want to do here. Essentially, it's the stuff that we'd already been doing in the extension API, and we want to take that progress that we made and port it back over to the cluster extension. So basically, if you've seen something in the cluster extension API, oh, and actually this reminds me, we were talking yesterday about one other thing that we want to do is make room. So part of this work in the extension API, we recognized there's a feature that's further down the roadmap that talks about allowing direct bundle installs. So rather than telling us, here's the packaged version that I want, we'll go find that from a catalog. Instead, you can say, here's just a bundle image, just go and use that. And so we want to make sure that the cluster extension API has room for us to be able to add that feature in a way that makes sense. So we're not going to actually add that feature. We're just going to make sure that the API is structured in a way that makes it easy for us to do that later. So those are the main 3 things that we're working on there. Removal of DEPI that Nikolai already mentioned, and then just making some improvements to the way that we update the status. And then lastly, you already saw the demo from Varsha about the using Helm directly and getting rid of, not necessarily getting rid of RuckPack, but getting rid of the RuckPack APIs at least. So that it's still not totally clear how we're going to do that, other than we know that the Ruckpack APIs won't be installed, and we'll handle everything directly from the operator controller. Up next on the list, one thing that I think we probably could start is removal of the extension API. So if anyone from the community is interested in pitching in on that, that would be something that probably wouldn't be that difficult to do. And then the rest of these are kind of dependent on, well, this one we could start too. Bryce has talked a little bit about, and I think has a POC up for adding encryption to catalog D. But anyway, the point is, like, if anybody's interested and wants to pick up or help pitch in on any of the things that are in the no status column, you know, we're definitely open to take some contributors and to at least explain a little bit more about what the goal is and have folks pitch in. So you don't necessarily have to say that you're going to own it and deliver the thing, but if you want to say like, hey, whenever you start working on this, I'd be interested in helping. Definitely let us know, because we're looking for more contributors to help speed things up for us. And with that, I think that's pretty much all I had. Were there any questions or comments about any of this?
Yeah, Joe, that first issue about removal.
Mm-hmm.
These are the no status ones are in order of importance, right? Like, because
they're generally in order of whether we can do them now or not. So like whether they're unblocked, and I'll move this one up because we could start that one. But other than that, yes. So like if they're unblocked, then the order is highest priority, lowest priority. If they're blocked, then it's still the same. To be honest,
Yeah,
these are fairly similar in priority, other than these last two, which we want to wait until we've sort of finished all the feature development before we go forth and do a review and finalize the APIs.
yeah, because that first one is one of the ones that we moved in above the cut line, right? Because we felt we had extra time, if I remember correctly.
This one is above the cut line because we don't want the extension API to be present at all for the initial 1.0.0.
Makes sense.
Just to decrease the scope that we're dealing with, and to essentially pull in the timing of when we would release all of this. The extension API we can always add later after 1.0.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Yep. Anything else? All right. Well, again, thanks a lot, Varsha and Mikolai, for the demos. I think that was fantastic. Let's keep doing that. I really liked it. Otherwise, we'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.